So as a lot of you out there know, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time. Highly anticipating the FF7 remake whenever it's going to come out for us. Who knows when that's going to be. Recently, of course, this game came to the Xbox One. Been playing the hell out of it. And as I progressed through this story, I was reminded of how strange a good amount of the enemies are in this game. And as we've heard from either Square Enix or people working at Square Enix, they want to kind of change certain things with the game to kind of modernize it, because it's very stuck in the 90s. If you play it, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I got to thinking that maybe some of these enemies, or maybe a lot of the enemies that are in Final Fantasy VII, might not make the cut in the remake. And as I've said pretty much anytime I've ever criticized this game or talked about certain things maybe not making it into the remake, I wouldn't be mad if all these enemies were actually in the Final Fantasy VII remake. It'd almost be hysterical to see some of these. There are some strange enemies in this game. I don't know if you guys know this, or if you've ever even played Final Fantasy VII, but if some of these were to be an FF7 remake, which looks like a game that's going to be very serious and maybe even dark in tone, it's going to bring you out of the experience for sure. By the way, let's hop into the 7 enemies we probably won't see in Final Fantasy VII Remake. First up on our list is Ghost Ship, which is pretty self-explanatory when you see it. It's an enemy that caught me off guard because I haven't played Final Fantasy VII in quite a while. I don't even have my physical copy anymore or my PlayStation 2. It wasn't an enemy I even remembered at all. When I ran into it, I was like, what the hell am I looking at? It's essentially a sentient pirate ship with half of a skeleton on the front of it with an oar that's not even really that big, like not as big as a pirate ship should be. And when you look at the gameplay for Final Fantasy VII, which is very similar to like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy 15, I can't imagine running around the world of FF7 and seeing a bunch of these around me. And what exactly would be the lore behind these enemies? Does somebody collect a bunch of tiny pirate ships, bring them to life, and then set them free in the underwater Mako reactor near Junon? Just a dumb enemy concept. Next up we have Hell House, which is a pretty self-explanatory enemy when you first look at it, but once you start doing enough damage to it, it actually opens up and there's like a creature inside. According to the Wikia, it is a mechanical creature, but it's still a pretty dumb enemy concept because there's no houses in the Sector 6 slums that are this small. He blends in with nothing. Knowing now that it's a mechanical creature of sorts makes it a little less weird. I've gone my entire life now playing this game up until this point, recording this video, thinking that it was some sort of actual creature that's somehow living in a tiny house. Still, a pretty weird enemy concept. Next up we have Granglin, I think is how you say that, I'm not entirely sure. The wiki doesn't say whether this is a regular enemy or a mechanical enemy, but it's essentially an egg. And once you attack it, it opens up into smaller eggs. This is another enemy that if it's mechanical in nature, it's a little bit less weird, but if it's a sentient egg that's giving birth to other living eggs right in front of us, that's pretty strange. Next up we have Two-Face, which is again another very self-explanatory enemy. It's an enemy that has 2 faces, one on each side. Whoever came up with the name of this enemy, give that guy a raise. I'm not exactly sure what they're supposed to be, if they're like floating heads or masks or whatever. You only fight them in the Coral Prison, which is a desert prison you go to that's below the Gold Saucer in the story. So theoretically when you're there, there's just a bunch of floating heads at all times all around you. This is another enemy, pretty much like all the other enemies on this list, that I want like a lore reason. I want this explained to me by Square Enix or the guys that worked on Final Fantasy VII. Give me the lore behind this enemy. Explain this guy to me. Next up we have the enemy mover, which I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be. It's like a beach ball or dodgeball or deflated balloon. I'm not exactly sure, but it's literally just like a ball. It's a rare enemy you find in the Northern Cave. It has low HP, low stats, but it gives you a good amount of AP and a good amount of gil. So they're highly sought after enemies. They also drop turbo ethers and protector rings when you kill them. Hands down, they have to be the laziest enemy concept in the entire game. It's a damn ball. That's all it actually is. And you're at the Northern Cave, like the final area in the entire game, working your way to fight Sephiroth and finish the game, and you have to fight a ball. Second to last, or the penultimate, as some channels might say, is the enemy sculpture, which is, I don't even know what it is. It's just like a slab of concrete or something. Is it like a tombstone or a monument to something or a mural of sorts? Like, I don't know what the hell this is supposed to be. But I cannot picture this damn thing running at me in Final Fantasy VII Remake and having to fight this thing and take it seriously. Now, normally when you do list videos, you tend to do like honorable mentions right before you do the number 1 spot, but I'd like to save those enemies for another video because there's a good amount of weird and strange and funny enemies in Final Fantasy VII that we could do a couple of these videos. So moving on to the number 1 spot, the final enemy on this list of the enemies that we probably won't see in Final Fantasy VII Remake, and it is called Warning Sign. Look at this actual abomination of an enemy concept. You fight this in the Shinra building. I think there's other enemies styled like this that you fight later on in the game. I'm almost 100%. I just recently fought one in the game. I just don't remember where. What the hell was Square Enix thinking? This is one of the enemies that throughout the years, ever since I was a kid, has always stuck in my mind. Also a Hell House, for whatever reason, we looked at him earlier on the list. He's an enemy that's always stuck with me too, but I always remember going through the Shinra headquarters, or Shinra building as I call it, and you're fighting pretty normal enemies. You're fighting like robotic enemies, a turret type of enemies, Shinra dudes with swords and guns, and then for whatever reason, you run into this absolute travesty. All the enemies on this list could obviously potentially be in the Final Fantasy VII Remake. They might not leave out any of them, but I would absolutely be blown the fuck away if this is in the remake. So there you have it, YouTube, a list of 7 enemies we probably won't see in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Again, if Square Enix decides to put all of them in the game, it won't bother me. I won't care in the slightest. But the reason a lot of these enemies make the list is because they don't logically make sense, which is kind of strange because we're talking about a video game and it's a fantasy video game with all kinds of weird enemies and creatures and concepts. But this game absolutely stands out because I don't know that any of the Final Fantasies before 7 had these kinds of strange and weird enemies. And I haven't played 8 in a long time, but I just recently finished Final Fantasy 9, which came to Xbox as well in February. And you're not fighting anything like this. You're not fighting, warning sign type enemies or ball enemies like Mover or sentient eggs that are laying other eggs. I'm not exactly sure what they're going for with some of the enemies in this game. Of course I love it, and if these enemies make it into the remake, there's a part of me that will absolutely embrace them, but I know like a lot of the newcomers who maybe never even played the original game are going to be blown away. They're not going to know what the hell to think. And as I mentioned previously, there are enough weird and quirky enemies in Final Fantasy VII that we can do at least 1 or 2 more of these videos. So if you guys want me to do that, be sure and let me know in the comments, and of course by liking the video. Either way, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new and want to stay up to date with more Final Fantasy VII content, turn on my notifications, follow me on Twitter at TheDashingDavid, and my Discord, links to my social networks are in the description, and in the outro. Later guys.
Give me forever for a while, give me forever for a while. Quit acting like a baby, or at least less like a child. Give me serenity, or at least just peace.